Welcome back to Tea with Tyson. We're going to be continuing to read in our Roll of Thunder, Hear My Cry. The last thing that we had read about was Caleb Wallace had met Mr. Morrison and the kids on the bridge with his truck, and Mr. Morrison had picked the truck up and moved it along. And at this point, Mama is very worried about the impact that this relationship that Mr. Morrison has with the Wallaces is going to turn bad. I'm starting on page 227. For those of you who should be following along in your book, you all should be following along. August dawned, blue and hot. The heat swooped low over the land, clinging like an invisible shroud, and through it people moved slowly, lethargically, as if underwater. In the ripening fields, the drying cotton and corn stretched tirelessly skyward, awaiting the coolness of a rain that occasionally threatened but did not come, and the land took on a baked brown look. To escape the heat, the boys and I often ambled into the coolness of the forest after the chores were done. There, while the cows and their calves grazed nearby, we sat on the banks of the pond, our backs propped against an old hickory or pine or walnut, our feet dangling lazily in the cool water, and waited for a watermelon brought from the garden to chill. Sometimes Jeremy joined us there, making his way through the deep forest land from his own farm over a mile away. But the meetings were never planned. None of our parents would have liked that. "How's your papa?" he asked one day as he plopped down beside us. "He's all right," said Stacy, "'cepting his legs bothering him in this heat, itching a lot. But Mama says that's a sign of it getting well." "That's good," murmured Jeremy. "Too bad he had to get hurt when he's done so's he couldn't go back to the railroad." Stacy stirred uneasily, looking at Christopher John, Little Man, and me, reminding us with his eyes that we were not to speak about the Wallace's part in Papa's injury, and said only, "Uh-huh." Jeremy was silent a moment and then stuttered, "Some folks saying they glad he got hurt, glad he can't make it to the railroad, can't go make that railroad money." "Who said that?" I cried, jumping up from the bank. "Just tell me who said it, and I'll ram—" "Cassie, sit down and be quiet," Stacy ordered. Reluctantly, I did as I was told, wishing that this business about the Wallaces and Papa's injuries were not so complex. It seemed to me that since the Wallaces had attacked Papa and Mr. Morrison, the simplest thing to do would be to tell the sheriff and have them put in jail. But Mama said things didn't work that way. She explained that as long as the Wallaces, embarrassed by their injuries at the hands of Mr. Morrison, did not make an official complaint about the incident, then we must remain silent also. If we did not, Mr. Morrison could be charged with attacking white men, which could possibly end in his being sentenced to the chain gang, or worse. I ain't the one said it, Cassie," stammered Jeremy, by way of apology. "Well, whoever's saying it ought not be," I said huffily. Jeremy nodded thoughtfully and changed the subject. "Y'all seen TJ lately?" Stacy frowned, considering whether or not he should answer. There had been much talk concerning TJ and the Sims brothers, all of it bad. Mo Turner's father had told Papa that TJ had stopped by with the Simses once, and after they had left, he had discovered his watch missing. The Laniers had had the same experience with a locket. "That TJ done turned real bad," Mr. Lanier had said, "and I don't want nothing to do with no thief, especially no thief running around with white boys." Finally, Stacy said, "Don't see him much no more." Jeremy pulled at his lip. "I see him all the time." "Too bad," I sympathized. Stacy glanced reproachfully at me, then lay flat upon the ground, his head resting in the cushion of his hands clasped under his head. "It sure is beautiful up there," he said, pointedly, changing the subject again. The rest of us lay back too. Overhead, the branches of the walnut and hickory trees met like long green fans, sheltering us. Several feet away, the persistent sun made amber roads of shimmering sunlight upon the pond. A stillness hovered in the high air, soft, quiet, peaceful. I think when I grow up, I'm going to build me a house and some trees and just live there all the time, said Jeremy. How are you going to do that? Asked Little Man. Oh, I'll find me some real strong trees and just build. I figure I'll have the trunk of one tree in the bedroom and another in the kitchen. How come you want to live in a tree for? Christopher John inquired. It's so peaceful up there and quiet. Cool, too, answered Jeremy, especially at night. How you know how cool it is at night? I said. Jeremy's face brightened. 'Cause I got my bedroom up there. We looked at him unbelieving. I do, really. Built it myself, and I sleeps up there. Come these hot nights, I just climbs in my tree, and it's like going into another world. Why, I can see and hear things up there I bet you only the squirrels and birds can see and hear. Sometimes I think I can even see all the way over to y'all's place. Aw, shoot, boy, you're a story, I said. Your place is too far away, and you know it. Jeremy's face dropped. Well, maybe I can't see it, but that don't keep me from pretending I do. He was silent a second, then hopped up suddenly, his face bright again. Hey, why don't you all come on over and see it? My papa's gonna be gone all day, and it'd be lots of fun, and I could show y'all. No, said Stacy quietly, his eyes still on the trees overhead. Jeremy sat back down, deflated. Just wanted y'all to see it, that's all. For a while he looked hurt by Stacy's cold refusal. Then, seeming to accept it as part of the things that they were, he again took up his position and volunteered good-naturedly, if y'all ever get a chance to build y'all selves a treehouse, just let me know, and I'll help ya. It's just as cool. Papa sat on a bench in the barn, his broken leg stretched awkwardly before him, mending one of Jake's harnesses. He had been there since early morning, a frown line carved deep into his forehead, quietly mending those things which needed mending. Mama told us not to bother him, and we stayed away from the barn as long as we could. But by late afternoon, we drifted naturally to it and began our chores. Papa had disappeared within himself, and he took no notice of us at first, but shortly afterward he looked up, watching us closely. When the chores were almost finished, Mr. Morrison arrived from Strawberry, where he had gone to make the August mortgage payment. He entered the barn slowly and handed Papa an envelope. Papa glanced up questioningly and then ripped it open. As he read the letter, his jaw set tightly, and when he finished, he smashed his fist so hard against the bench that the boys and I stopped what we were doing, aware that something was terribly wrong. They tell you? He asked Mr. Morrison, his voice curt, angry. Mr. Morrison nodded. I tried to get them to wait till after cotton picking, but they told me it was due and payable immediately. Them's they words. Harlan Granger, said Papa quietly. He reached for his cane and stood up. You feel up to going back to Strawberry? Tonight? I can make it, but I don't know if this old mule can. Then hitch Lady to it, he said, motioning to the mare. He turned then and went to the house. The boys and I followed, not quite sure what was happening. Papa entered the kitchen. We stayed on the porch, peering through the screen. David, something the matter, son? The bank called up the note. I'm going to Strawberry. Called up the note, echoed Big Ma. Oh, Lord, not that, too. Mama stared at Papa, fear in her eyes. You going now? Now, he said, leaving the kitchen for their room. Mama's voice trailed after him. David, it's too late. The bank's closed by now. You can't see anyone until morning. We could not hear Papa's reply, but Mama's voice rose sharply. You want to be out on that road again in the middle of the night after what happened? You want us worried to death about you? Mary, don't you understand? They're trying to take the land, Papa said, his voice rising too, so that we heard. Don't you understand? I don't want you dead. We could hear nothing else, but a few minutes later, Papa came out and told Mr. Morrison to unhitch Lady. They would go to Strawberry in the morning. The next day, Papa and Mr. Morrison were gone before I rose. When they returned in the late afternoon, Papa sat wearily down at the kitchen table with Mr. Morrison beside him. Rubbing his hand over his thick hair, he said, "I called Hammer." "What did you tell him?" Mama asked. "Just that the note's been called. He said he'd get the money." "How?" "He didn't say. I didn't ask. Just said he'd get it." "And Mr. Higgins at the bank, David?" said Big Ma. "What'd he have to say?" "Said our credit's no good anymore." "We aren't even hurting the Wallaces now," Mama said with acid anger. "Harlan Granger's got no need." "Baby, you know he's got a need," Papa said, pulling her to him. "He's got a need to show us where we stand in the scheme of things. He's got a powerful need to do that. Besides, he still wants this place." "But, son, that mortgage gave us 4 more years." Papa laughed dryly. "Mama, you want me to take it to court?" Big Ma sighed and placed her hand on Papa's. "What if Hammer can't get the money?" Papa did not look at her, but at Mr. Morrison instead. "Don't worry, Mama. We ain't going to lose the land. Trust me." On the 3rd Sunday of August, the annual revival began. Revivals were always very serious, yet gay and long-planned-for affairs, which brought pots and pans from out-of-the-way shelves, mothball-packed dresses, and creased pants from hidden chests, and all the people from the community and neighboring communities up the winding red school road to Great Faith Church. The revival ran for 7 days, and it was an occasion everyone looked forward to, for it was more than just church service. It was the year's only planned social event, disrupting the humdrum of everyday country life. Teenagers courted openly, adults met with relatives and friends they had not seen the previous year's big meeting, and the children ran almost free. As far as I was concerned, the best part of the revival was the very first day. After the first of 3 services was dismissed, the mass of humanity, which had squished its way into the sweltering interior of the small church, poured into the school grounds, and the women proudly set out their dinners in the backs of wagons and on long tables circling the church. Then it was a feast to remember. Brimming bowls of turnip greens and black-eyed peas with ham hocks, thick slices of last winter's sugar-cured ham and strips of broiled ribs, crispy fried chicken and morsels of golden squirrel and rabbit, flaky buttermilk biscuits and crusty cornbread, fat slabs of sweet potato pie and butter pound cake, and so much more were all for the taking. No matter how low the pantry supplies, each family always managed to contribute something, and as the churchgoers made the rounds from table to table, hard times were forgotten, at least for one day. The boys and I had just loaded our plates for the first time and taken seats under the old walnut when Stacy put down his plate and stood up again. "What's the matter?" I asked, stuffing my mouth with cornbread. Stacy frowned into the sun. "That man walking up the road." I took a moment to look up, then picked up my drumstick. "So?" "He looks like Uncle Hammer," he cried, and dashed away. I hesitated, watching him, reluctant to leave my plate unless it really was Uncle Hammer. When Stacy reached the man and hugged him, I put down the plate and ran across the lawn to the road. Christopher John with his plate still in hand, and Little Man ran after me. "Uncle Hammer, where's your car?" Little Man asked after we had all hugged him. "Sold it," he said. "Sold it?" we all cried in unison. But why?" asked Stacy. "Needed the money," Uncle Hammer said flatly. As we neared the church, Papa met us and embraced Uncle Hammer. "I wasn't expecting you to come all the way down here." "You expected me to send that much money by mail?" "Could have wired it." "Don't trust that either." "How'd you get it?" "Borrowed some of it. Sold a few things," he said with a shrug. Then he nodded toward Papa's leg. "How'd you do that?" Papa's eyes met Uncle Hammer's, and he smiled faintly. "I was sort of hoping you wouldn't ask that." "Uh-huh." "Papa," I said, "Uncle Hammer sold the Packard." Papa's smile faded. "I didn't mean for that to happen, Hammer." Uncle Hammer put his arm around Papa. "What good's a car? It can't grow cotton. You can't build a home on it, and you can't raise 4 fine babies in it. Papa nodded, understanding. Now, you going to tell me about that leg? Papa stared at the milling throng of people around the dinner tables. Let's get you something to eat first, he said. Then I'll tell you. Maybe it'll set better with some of this good food in your stomach. And we'll stop there.